Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, Making the Digital Marketing Grade in an Omnichannel World. My name is Chris, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Audio is being provided via voice over IP. Be sure to turn up the sound on your speakers. If you have any audio or technical difficulty, please click on the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical issues. If you are unable to resolve the issue or have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your questions. We will try to answer all questions during the webcast, but may run out of time, so we'll reply via email after the presentation. Lastly, an on-demand version of the webcast will be available and sent to your email in the next few days. Now I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Jamie Ray, Executive Director, Retail at Neustar, and Lauren Freeman, President, E-Tailing Group. Thank you both for being here today, and with that, I'll hand the presentation over to Lauren.
Thank you so much, Chris, and I'm excited to be here and working on this digital marketing project. I think really provides some interesting insights, and hopefully you'll see it that way as well. Before I get started, I want to share with you a little bit of the E-Tailing Group background for those of you who are not familiar with us. We've been involved in e-commerce consulting for over 20 years. Client projects range from strategic planning to merchandising, marketing, technology development, and thought leadership. We're very well known for our proprietary research studies. We were the first people to do mystery shopping online, merchandising, mobile, and we're now in the process of working on an omnichannel index. So you'll be hearing a lot more about omnichannel today. I'm certain that it's important to most of you. So let's go ahead and dig into the data and share with you some of the things that we found. And before I go ahead and do that, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the digital marketing research methodology and demographics. For purposes of this study, we surveyed online just over 1,000 consumers. We had 25 online questions. The demographics were split 50% male, 50% female. We were certainly looking to go after shoppers, so people who had to have spent at least $250 online, purchased 4 times annually, and as much of the presentation is about mobile and digital marketing, we knew it was critical for people to own a smartphone. You can see that the age is reflective of the census and the household income is a bell curve. So we really wanted to represent the typical shopping audience in order to give you the best perspective. So our first question that we asked is when you think about all of the advertising and the marketing that you receive from retailers, so be it print, mobile, social, desktop, if you had to assign a grade to how targeted or relevant it is to your personal needs, what grade would that be? And unfortunately, what you can see is that only 7% of consumers gave you an A, and I think this is an issue, so there's going to be some homework to be done, during this school year, and I think moving into 2016. Lots of work from a relevancy perspective, from a marketing always-on perspective, and really from an attribution perspective. So let's go ahead and hear a little bit more about that. There's a retail marketing dilemma, and the dilemma is that the shoppers are channel agnostic. If you think about even just yourself, we're shopping across every channel. One minute I'm at a retail store, the next minute I might be on a desktop, then I might be, sitting in the airport yesterday for a few hours too many, and I'm on my mobile phone placing an order, and sometimes people are even in social placing those orders as well, or just researching. So this behavior of the consumer really needs to be understood. One thing that we found out, and I've certainly seen in other research that I've also done, is that we know retailers appreciate omnichannel, but we're not sure that they're there from a data point of view. And so Jamie's going to be talking a little bit about that today. So retailers need to accurately track their evolving customer journeys. If they can't track their journeys, they're not going to be in a good position to invest smartly from a digital marketing perspective. You need to understand where the shoppers have engaged, and you want to be able to reach them accordingly. So Jamie's going to be talking a lot about this in the second half of the presentation. So let's just look at today's customer journey and some of the top influencers on a customer's decision to shop. And as you can see, many of them are important, and this is really what becomes a little bit of a challenge. Most of them are over 50%. So all of these channels are a factor. So if you think about it, you start at the top of the list, you see friends and family, 78%, the number one influencer. But very close behind, and probably one of the most interesting factors, is the in-store visit. So from an omnichannel perspective, so many of us may be going to the store, going to the mall. We might be coming home later and placing the order. So we're doing our homework in the store channel, and maybe we're purchasing online, or maybe we're having to visit the store multiple times. So it's an important influencer that you might not expect to see that high. Coupons and discounts, always a factor. It's the case here for 3 and 4 people. Everybody wants to get a deal. But what's also interesting is to see that you've got a lot of sort of traditional marketing channels like TV, radio, direct mail, newspapers, all coming in the 55 to 65% range. Email is certainly important, and though written off for dead over the years, it still produces very strong results. 54% for personalized, and 50% of the folks are saying that generic emails are an influence when it comes to their decision to shop. And just to take a look a little bit, going down, towards the bottom of the chart, some of those I think we should also identify because while something like mobile ads are at 28% today, that's something that we'll probably see in the 40 to 50% range in a very short period of time. So all of these are a factor, and all of these are important in consumer decision making. So omnichannel is in play everywhere, and you need to be everywhere in order to accommodate today's consumers. In the spirit of, the school season, marketing supplies and budgets should be oriented towards the always-on digital customer. So think about it in 3 different ways. The first is the digital spend. Digital spend is on the rise. It's up 5% between October of 2014 and June of this year. So we're seeing movement there. Retail vertical is certainly ahead of the curve, at the top of the class. They'll be spending nearly twice as much as any other industry on mobile advertising in 2015. So again, they're believers. They know their shoppers are shopping everywhere, as we've just shown in the prior slides. They're viewing retail ads. Customers will read and click on more ads online, as 1 in 5 shoppers plan to view more retail advertising in the coming year. So we can only expect that number to continue to grow. So again, retailers need to put themselves in the best position. So how are they going to do that? To ace marketing, retailers must master 5 key subjects. So let's take a look at those 5. First and foremost, you want to start with the fundamentals. You need to put the digital dollars where the customers are. And there's 2 important things to be thinking about here. The first is that most consumers say they read at least 26%, basically 1 in 4 of the advertising when it's present. So they're out there. They're taking a look at it, whether it be on that digital device, mobile device, or whether it be on their desktop. These numbers get a bump if we're talking about millennials. So depending on who your audience is and who your customer base is, you really want to pay attention to these numbers below. So 2 times, ads seen multiple times get twice as many clicks from a millennial perspective. When it's personalized, it's even better. Personalized ads can get as much as 3 times the number of clicks. So again, that relevancy and personalization that I touched on in the beginning. 2 times as likely to look at the ads shown the millennial folks are, and 2 times more millennials plan to view more advertising on a mobile device. So if this is your customer, you need to be mobile, you need to be relevant, you need to be personalized, because the expectations among that millennial customer base are even stronger than traditional audiences. Number 2, always-on marketing is the key to raising your grade. You need to be where the customers are. We can't emphasize that enough. 2 out of 3 U.S. smartphone users check their phones within 15 minutes of rising and going to bed. Again, it's critical, and in my situation with my daughter, I think it's 5 minutes after she gets up. So again, we all know we're on there, and if that's the first thing you see and that's the purchase you're looking to make that day, it's going to have pretty powerful impact. You need to be speedy. Shoppers quickly make purchases, often within hours or the same day. And this, I think, was one of the most interesting findings of the study, was the fact that, when people look at high and low consideration purchases, millennials make their high consideration shopping purchases faster, as almost half buy the same day versus 27% of their 55-plus counterparts. So again, if you're in the business of selling those high consideration products, and you're selling to that younger audience, you better be in a place where they're purchasing, because could be making a same-day purchase. If you're not there, you're going to be losing out to your competitors. 1 in 3 shoppers has clicked on a retailer's ad, so again, getting a lot of visibility, receiving very strong attention. And 1 in 5 shoppers plan to view more retail advertising in the coming year. So again, we're expecting very, very strong growth here. You've got to do the math, and when you do the math, mobile matters. We asked which research device is most important to you, and not surprisingly, the laptop, the desktop, and the PC still comes up number 1 at 43%. But what's interesting to see is the smartphone or the tablet or the mobile device is already at the 37% mark, and I think if we looked at this from a millennial perspective, it would even be higher. So again, this is an area that you need to be focusing on and thinking about mobile advertising and how you're addressing that always-on shopper. We also asked, where's the last advertising you look at before making a purchase? And what you see here is when it comes to the low consideration purchases in the gray, it's about a 2-to-1 ratio. So desktop, 52%, half the people it was their last view, and from a mobile perspective at 26%. But again, I think pretty strong to think that that was the last advertising that they looked at before they made their final decision. And again, when it comes to high consideration, you see the desktop slightly higher as a result of the fact that there's probably more research being done, and it's a bit of more of an information-intensive purchase, so the needs, I think, are slightly different there. A couple slides I want to look at when we asked, thinking about the last 3 months, how often did you do each of the following via a mobile device? So let's look at the top 4 before we dig into the entire chart. First and foremost, 42% have researched products on their mobile device prior to visiting a store. So again, a lot of homework is done in advance of the store visit, certainly a lot related to inventory, and just people want to be prepared when they go in, so they're very, very efficient once they do reach the store. 38% have searched for a retail coupon for purchase online. We talked about the discounts before, and certainly that's no different when it comes to mobile. I think what's also interesting for me here, and something I do all the time, is search for a retail coupon for a purchase in the store. So again, I might be going to Ulta and I want to use the $3.50 off a $10 coupon that I know they have, and I'll go ahead and do that. While I'm in the store, I'm not really thinking about it. I don't have the time before I get there. So any way you can find that discount, the shopper's certainly going to be looking for it. And lastly, for 1 in 3 shoppers, research products and alternatives on your mobile device during a store visit. So for a lot of people, the fun doesn't stop, before they get to the store. There's a lot that can be done, from scanning and getting information. It could be looking at product reviews. So there's so much information that needs to be done. It could be comparison pricing. For some people, it may actually be purchasing from a competitor. So a lot is happening from an in-store perspective as well when it comes to mobile. A couple things I just want to point out. This shows you the full view of this graph. And, one of the ones is that the bottom call out is that retailer ads drive omnichannel behavior for 1 in 4 consumers. 25% said that they clicked on a retailer's ad and subsequently visited their physical store. So I think this is exciting because when you think about making that digital investment, you know that it's going to go beyond the online world, and there's an opportunity to drive traffic. And I think mobile is really, really a factor in terms of making that happen. So again, lots more to be had, shopping and researching both prior to the store visits as well as in-store. And you can even see that we're in the 17 and 18% range. Still interesting to see that purchase products as a result of a text message sent by a retailer. We're seeing more of that, as well as 17% who say purchase products on your mobile device during a store visit. So there's a lot of activity, and we really need to be focused heavily on what's happening with mobile. Another area, switching gears a little bit to the social side, is to think in terms of digital influence. And when asked, what channel is influential on a customer's decision to research a product? I couldn't help but pull this out when I saw that the consumers who took the survey, 50% said general email is influential, but 46%, almost on par, gave social media advertising, called it influential in terms of their decision when researching a product. So there's another opportunity, and maybe hasn't really been seized on to the same degree as mobile or other areas. Number 4, you need to understand the offline implications. And here, 75% or 3 in 4 shoppers rank in-store visits as being very influential in prompting research on a product. So again, don't lose sight of the role of in-store. And I think the good thing that we're starting to see, I think in the stores, as I've been doing some technology research, is that the associates are stronger and that the retailers realize that they really need to be investing in their omnichannel culture. 25%, 1 in 4 consumers who click on a digital ad subsequently visit the advertiser's physical store. So again, they're going to come to you, so you don't have to worry about that. If you want customers to share their location with you when they're near the store, which of course many retailers do, I mean, that's the first step to getting them in the store, is you really need to start by offering inventory information. And to me, that's the inventory transparency. That's the, do you have the dress I need and the size I need so that I can pick it up today, and what time does your store close? I mean, that's what the customer wants to know, and that's their expectation when they're localizing that experience. The other thing that consumers said that they were interested in, again, you see the discounts and the promotions. If you make those available, consumers will be accepting of sharing those locations. Number 5, make your ads relevant or risk losing your customers. So if you go back to the initial slide that we started out with, how are you going to make your marketers help them get to that A that they all want to be at? 69% of consumers say that the retailer's ads are not relevant or on target, and there's a missed opportunity. And I think if we don't continue to make those relevant, we're not going to see those open rates go. We're not going to see the interest that we want to see in terms of that advertising. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and shift gears and ask you if you'll take a minute or two to just look at these 3 poll questions, because we want to understand, how you rank yourself and how would you grade yourself in the following 3 areas. So our first question is, can you identify your prospects and your customers across channels? So again, A, B, C, D. Let us know where you stand, and we'll be sharing the answers, these results at the end of the presentation. Okay. Our second one is maybe a little more difficult. Can you attribute sales to specific channels? So do you know what's going, online, what's happening offline? Again, A, B, C, or D. How well are you doing in this area? And lastly, is your advertising personalized and relevant for each customer who sees it? I mean, are you taking a one-to-one approach here? Again, how are you stacking up? You're top of the heap or a little bit lower down? So now that you've graded yourself, I'm going to turn things over to Jamie, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the $2.2 trillion question. Jamie, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. And all just to reintroduce myself, yes, this is Jamie Ray, and I'd like to extend my welcome and thanks you all for joining today's webinar. So you're seeing a really big number on the screen, $2.2 trillion. According to Deloitte, digital interactions are expected to influence 64 cents of every dollar spent in store by the end of this year, totaling $2.2 trillion. So it's obvious there's a massive opportunity and need for marketers to master omnichannel, and as Lauren highlighted, according to consumers, most marketers aren't making the grade. Having said that, solving for omnichannel can be difficult for a number of reasons. It's certainly not impossible, but even more importantly, it's really necessary to figure out for you all to remain competitive. I'm sure there's a long laundry list of things that make effective omnichannel marketing hard. I'm going to highlight for you 5 primary things that we hear about when we're talking with Fortune 500 marketers and hearing about the challenges that they face. And then after I've laid out those challenges, I'll walk you through just a few key capabilities that you need to master in order to excel in omnichannel marketing. So the first challenge is what we at Neustar refer to as the marketer's identity crisis. Simply put, it's very hard for you all to know who is at the other end of an interaction with your brand. On one hand, you have to keep up with constantly changing consumer information. As this slide suggests, 75 million people change phone carriers, 45 million people change their phone numbers, 16 million relocate annually, 2.1 million change their name legally every year. The CRM databases often contain stale customer information, which results in an incomplete or inaccurate view of your customers because of all this. And now you layer on kind of the right side of this slide, the sheer volume of data that's being captured across an exploding number of customer touch points and consumers' ubiquitous connectivity to your brands through devices like mobile, and the effort required to maintain a complete and up-to-date view of your customers can be quite difficult. So now, to add insult to injury, consumers want and expect you to be able to know who they are and communicate with them consistently, regardless of which channel they may choose to interact with your brand. According to Deloitte, only 35% of marketers actually have an omnichannel strategy. Now, while that may be an alarming stat, especially in light of the fact that I think most marketers seem to understand and talk about the importance of omnichannel, it is explainable or perhaps even defensible, because the majority of you can only identify a fraction of your customers and prospects across channels. As the slide build just suggested, most marketers can only identify 40% of their customers and prospects across channels. So it's virtually impossible to execute an omni-channel strategy if you can't identify and target the right consumers or identify which consumers are interacting with your brand. The second key challenge you all face is having many silos of consumer data. So silos spawn buckets of data that don't connect with one another and can't resolve various consumer data points that are captured back to a single person. This makes building a 360-degree view of your customers very difficult. You all have all sorts of different types of systems. You manage CRM systems, POS systems, billing systems, email databases, online user accounts, et cetera, et cetera. And more than likely, the data you're capturing on a single user across these various systems can vary wildly. For instance, I may have signed up for a cardless loyalty program with maybe just my name and mobile phone number, and I have used one email address to sign up for your email alerts and yet another at point of sale. So the challenge for you all is in stitching together all this disparate fractional customer data and building a complete customer profile that will enable you to have better segmentation models, establish more accurate lifetime values, and so forth. And the third challenge here is the nonlinear path to purchase that consumers use today. So before the explosion of digital channels, the path to purchase was extremely linear and even predictable as consumers moved from awareness to consideration and ultimately to a purchase. Now, however, consumers move in and out of channels very fluidly at any point in their path to purchase. They average about 6 touch points as they research products prior to a transaction, and that number likely goes up with higher consideration purchases. So marketers like yourself need to be able to identify consumers at any point along the path to purchase so you can engage them in a timely and relevant way and move them closer to a conversion. And then naturally, the holy grail is then linking all of those interactions back to unique individuals and tying ad exposure data to sales data to understand media and channel effectiveness. But we'll touch more on that in a couple of minutes. The fourth challenge is providing relevant and personalized experiences that consumers just quite frankly now expect from you. Digital marketing allows us to get beyond the one-to-many approach of traditional offline marketing and move to true one-to-one messaging without giving up scale. So geo-targeting or geo-versioning of content, such as weekly ads or coupons or what have you, is really just table stakes now. The challenge isn't merely identifying the right groups of cookies or device IDs that you want to target. The challenge is also to know something about who's on the other end of that interaction so you can engage them in a relevant way and get them into the purchase funnel. You just absolutely need to have a foundation of accurate identity, which can then unlock valuable insights of who you're reaching, which in turn inform how to best engage that particular user. The fifth and final challenge is potentially one of the hardest ones, which is measurement, right? So everybody on this call, I'm sure, recognizes that the majority of retail sales still take place offline in brick and mortar stores. I'm also pretty confident that everybody on the call understands consumers spend most of their media time online. And this, these two stats kind of all go back to the big number, the $2.2 trillion number from Deloitte that I spoke about earlier. So on the one hand, tying online ad exposures to online conversions is pretty straightforward. The bigger challenge is in tying online ad exposures to offline sales. I personally believe this is an area that needs an acceleration in understanding of the capabilities that do exist today and in actually testing those capabilities. For instance, print circulars, they've been a dominant investment for many retailers for a very long time. And clearly those dollars have continued to shrink as consumers spend less time with print and more time online. I actually just read a stat yesterday that the number of circular pages are down 20% year over year for July. So that swoon of readership continues. However, I don't think those dollars have really been reinvested into digital at a rate that any of us would expect. And to be clear, I'm not suggesting that print goes away. I'm suggesting that its role is smaller than it used to be, and the media mix needs to change. So for that to happen, clearly measurement of digital's effect on both online and offline sales, as well as understanding which digital channels are most effective, is something marketers need to do to build an effective media mix and truly master omnichannel marketing. Okay, so we talked about 5 key challenges to omnichannel marketing, again, based on the conversations Neustar has with many, many advertisers. Along the way, we touched on some key concepts that I'll walk through in a bit more detail now. There are really 3 key subjects to mastering effective omnichannel marketing. The first and foremost is identity. Simply put, it all starts here. You can't begin to understand who your customers are or how to target, reach, and message to them effectively until you can build a comprehensive view of who they are and how they're interacting with your brand across channels. The second is activation. Once you've built this strong identity foundation, now you need to be able to reach your customers and prospects seamlessly across channels and devices as they're moving fluidly along the path to purchase while ultimately heading towards a transaction. And then, of course, finally, you need to be able to measure. Connecting the dots of various cross-channel consumer interactions, tying those interactions back to a single identifier, linking ad exposure data to sales data, is absolutely paramount for you to know if your strategies are indeed effective. So let's start by talking a little bit about identity here. So as we highlighted earlier, marketers collect consumer data across a number of touch points and systems. Without question, the volume of data collected and the fragmented manner in which it's collected really leads to dirty identity data. It's unfortunately unavoidable. The good news is it's also fixable. So at any point, depending on the systems you have and how consumers are interacting with your brands, you're collecting a bunch of fractional consumer identities or identifiers, which includes things like name, address, mobile phone number, landline phone number, email address, device ID, cookie, IP, all these things. And the challenge is to establish a foundation of accurate identity, which all other marketing efforts will build off of. And you need to aggregate these data sources and identifiers and resolve these multiple touch points and consumer data points back to a single person. Of course, to be privacy compliant, all PII needs to be removed and replaced with a single persistent identifier that becomes this linkage key to target, reach, and measure all digital interactions that your consumers are having with your brand. So curating disparate points of consumer data into a single identity also enables the ability to unlock a wealth of additional consumer insights. With a known identity, you'll have a complete picture of a consumer's relationship with your brand and unleash the ability to layer on a significant number of insights that give you a broader view of your customers and prospects. So that includes insights into how they behave and what interests they have outside of their actual interactions with your brand. Knowing what media channels they prefer, what competitors they shop, other demographics and psychographic information will all inform more effective marketing campaigns. So now that you've established an authoritative offline identity, the second key to successful omnichannel marketing is to activate those consumers across channels. There's basically 2 ways to do this. First, you can utilize your first-party CRM data, offline CRM data, and anonymously map those customers to cookies and device IDs that can be reached by buying media through all the various publishers and DSPs. The second is to leverage third-party data and extend the audiences you're targeting by building lookalikes to your top-performing customer segments. For instance, you may want to target audiences that have a propensity to buy specific products or categories of products, but that audience is not necessarily bought from you. So lookalike audiences will enable much broader reach beyond your brand loyalists and allow you to drive new customer acquisition. So with first and third-party audiences identified, it's It's now time to reach them by running campaigns across channels that are going to target this universe of persistent IDs that ultimately align with your campaign goals. And the ability to reach unique individuals, regardless of what channel they're in, will enable you to create consistent and relevant user experiences. So targeting and reaching your desired audience is certainly step one. From there to truly ace omnichannel, you need to use the intelligence of who is behind the cookie or device ID to serve a relevant message. For instance, just because I'm a loyal shopper of a sporting goods store, that may not be enough. If you serve me ads for women's workout clothes, for instance, you've just wasted an impression. If you continue to do that, you may also alienate me as a loyal customer. However, if you're serving me ads for hockey or golf equipment, you've got a very good chance of engaging me and driving me either online or perhaps even ultimately into store. Similarly, if you don't use your first-party data to your benefit, you can not only end up wasting impressions, but you'll look disorganized with your customers. So I've got a personal experience of this. Is I bought a snowblower last year from one of the big box home improvement guys. And I researched online before I ended up buying, and then subsequently after that research, I was retargeted with ads for snowblowers for weeks after my purchase. Best case for that retailer is that I found it moderately annoying, and I didn't think they had their act together. Worst case is they wasted a bunch of impressions on me, and who knows how many other shoppers they waste impressions on, which ultimately puts campaign performance metrics way out of whack. So the point here is the identity and consumer data that sits behind the cookie or device ID should absolutely be leveraged to serve the right offer to the right person and also at the right time. So the third and final key to effective omnichannel marketing is measurement. You have to be able to attribute digital media's effect on both online and offline sales to establish true ROI of omnichannel marketing. And before I dive into a brief overview on methodology, I just want to reestablish what I've mentioned a couple times, which is this concept of a unique persistent identifier. So at Neustar, everything starts with authoritative offline identity. We use our extensive database that includes accurate offline data on virtually every household in the U.S. We map marketers' CRM data to our offline database. And once a match is made, we throw away all the PII and replace it with what we call a PID, or a persistent ID. That PID ultimately has all sorts of cookies and device IDs attached to it. So all impressions that are bought within a media campaign will be based on targeting this appropriate universe of PIDs. And that PID ultimately becomes the linkage key that enables closed-loop measurement. So let's walk through at a high level how closed-loop measurement works. So first, starting at the top left, a brand decides to target first and or third-party audiences. You buy impressions against all these relevant cookies and device IDs. When an ad gets served, a cookie is established and then tied to the PID. And throughout the course of the campaign, and most likely some halo period at the end of it, exposed PIDs are captured and a database of all exposed PIDs is created. Then at the end of all this, the advertiser sends online and offline transaction data to Neustar, again at the completion of the campaign and halo period. Neustar matches the PII from the transaction file to our PID to establish which of the exposed PIDs converted and what the spend was. From there, we can then determine the lift of exposed versus unexposed users based on cross-channel sales data. We can also perform multi-touch attribution analysis to determine which channels were utilized along the path to purchase and which channels were most effective at driving the conversion. It is also worth noting, however, that closed-loop measurement can be performed without first-party transaction data by leveraging credit card partners or even syndicated sales data from partners like somebody like a Kantar Shopcom. So in summary, omnichannel excellence truly starts with a strong foundation of identity that can be used to build a complete customer view by stitching together known and anonymous interactions and connecting with the right audience across channels. Identity then, on top of that, fuels understanding of who's on the other end of the interaction and the power to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time. And finally, all of these interactions must be captured, attributed to a persistent ID, and tied to your KPIs to truly understand lift on sales, purchase path, and media effectiveness. So it's, unfortunately very easy for shoppers to change brands quickly if they're not getting what they need from one particular brand. So this makes the stakes extremely high for being effective at omnichannel. We heard from Lauren that the majority of consumers don't think omnichannel is working. It's going to be interesting to see how you grade yourselves. We've also talked about the fact that omnichannel is hard and some of the reasons why that's so. The good news, however, is that effective omnichannel marketing can be solved for, and if you ace it, the results are truly exceptional. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Lauren. Let's see how you graded yourselves. We'll do some wrap-up and then move into Q&A.
Fantastic. Well, we all certainly have our work cut out for us this holiday season, as well as moving into the coming year. So I'm sure you're all ready to hear the results, and I'm certainly anxious to see them. So we'll see. I always like to say, how honest are the retailers? And I think what you can see here is they're probably fairly honest. When we ask, can you identify your prospects and customers across channels, you can see that, the number one grade was a C, so they're probably average. So again, lots of work to be done as we had kind of predicted earlier on. But, good for the folks that are 20% on the A. They've probably put a lot of work into the data, but again, that's a small number. Can you attribute sales to specific channels? So here, interesting to see, over half of the folks gave themselves an A, and then, we've got certainly about almost 1 in 4 looks like it would be C or under, so it's definitely a challenge there. And B, we want to work toward that A. So again, higher than I might have expected there. And lastly, is your advertising personalized and relevant for every customer? And we knew that was the biggest factor in terms of why consumers scored retailers low. And again, here we see that the reality of one-to-one is not there. We're still at almost 3 out of 4 retailers, said that almost 75% exactly were C or under. Again, so lots of needs, lots of understanding, and hopefully you can leverage some of Jamie's insights, I think, in terms of really elevating that digital experience that you're offering and your ability to not only identify those people, but to have that attribution in place. So while you're thinking about that, I'm going to go ahead and just share some final thoughts in terms of how you can make the grade in the coming year. Number one, understand how marketers can recognize, and engage with customers across channels, online and offline. You need to get in front of the customer where they are via the right touch points, because as we learned, it's like the retail dilemma. They're across all of the touch points. Focus on relevant and timely advertising in order to exert influence. So the whole notion of the relevancy being critical, but the fact that even particularly for both the high-intensive, low-intensive products, being timely is going to be critical if you remember the percentage of people that came in via mobile as their last place that they saw the advertising. So you need to be in that right place and hit it in the right moment. Mobile's always on status makes it your best bet for staying top of mind. So, the investment on the understanding of the mobile shopper and potentially its ability to drive in-store traffic. Start using digital influence to get customers into the store, because we know it's still 90% of the business. Use digital insights to drive more effective campaigns online and offline. So again, the understanding that you're going to gain and the information in a way that you can leverage it. Speak to your shoppers. Today's consumers want to be reached based on their interests, behaviors, and social groups. So, I'll always remember, the snowblower story, or you better be sending them golf or hockey, or you're not going to hit it. Jamie won't be purchasing anything. And lastly, be prepared for moving targets, because that's exactly what the consumer is. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Chris, who's going to take us into the Q&A portion of the program. Chris?
Thank you so much, Lauren. And as you said, now we will move into the Q&A portion of the presentation. Real quick question. How does this link up with in-store POS, credit card, etc.?
Chris, I'm sorry. So that's probably for me. Can you repeat that again?
Yeah, it was Kathy wanted to know how all this links up with in-store POS, credit card, etc.
Yeah. So there's the kind of secret sauce behind the way measurement works is that Neustar has again, we've mapped a number of cookies and device IDs, a very large universe of them, back to what we call a PID. Now, that PID actually has attached to it PII data. This is done in a privacy-compliant manner, ultimately, in a hash, so there's no PII ultimately being shared. But the bottom line is that we can say this particular cookie, which has this PID, has been exposed to an ad. That PID matches up to some PII, which is ultimately what's matched to a POS file. And at the end of the day, we're not going to provide analysis that says John Smith saw the ad, John Smith bought, but we would report back to say this universe of PIDs was exposed to ads, and this is how they behaved or transacted compared to those who were not exposed to the ad. So hopefully that helps. It's a good question, and there's a lot that goes into the closed loop piece, but hopefully that helps.
Awesome. Great answer. While we know that shoppers are omnichannel, it seems easier said than done to measure this behavior. What tips would you suggest to really nail this?
Yeah, so I'll take that as well. I think the simple thing is you have to test, right? So you've got to test, and testing doesn't mean you have to spend $500,000, right? I think you can pick a market, you can pick a channel, a digital channel that you want to use, and try to suppress other marketing efforts in that particular market, and do simple match market testing, right? I think there's ways to dip your toe in the water just to begin to get a sense of, is digital helping drive store transactions? And I know for some retailers, it's not even necessarily seen as I need to see sales spike or something 2% in a market. If they remain flat, but you can cut out marketing costs of more expensive offline channels, that can also be a win sometimes. So I think you can dip your toe in the water with match market testing. I think you can dip your toe in the water with do you want to provide a unique coupon code or offer that's specifically tied to perhaps a digital display ad campaign. Those are things to do, I think, before you maybe jump into the more of the deep end, which is some of the stuff I walked through, which is true blue, closed loop measurement, down to individuals, and ultimately attributing what channels were more effective than others in that overall media mix.
Awesome. Where do you see mobile's impact headed, and how can we best prepare for the likely changes?
I can touch on that a little bit. I'm sure, Jamie, you have some other things in that area. I mean, as it is today, MCommerce already makes up 13% of total digital commerce dollars. And I think if you look at any of the forecasts, they're very, very strong. And I know one I made a note of is that 30% of global retail e-commerce spending, that's what mobile is going to be by 2018. So that alone just says you need to be paying attention. And I think all we need to do is look around us and look at the impact. And the other thing that I would observe is that I know in our own mobile research, we just concluded looking at 50 sites and their mobile shopping experiences. And it's amazing to me just in 1 year the improvements that you see, and maybe in the past year where I wouldn't have shopped via mobile and maybe I'm not the target customer, now I see the experience is really, really improving. So again, as they continue to improve, I think more customers are going to gravitate to it. And if you remember that one slide, they're going to look and go from being 37% being the preferred device to probably, moving toward the 50% mark. And I think that won't surprise anyone.
Yeah, and I think I would tag on that, Chris. I totally agree. I think Lauren made some great points there, and certainly her presentation, highlighted this, this ubiquitous connectivity and this always-on connectivity that you have with mobile shoppers. I think that mobile started like a lot of other channels started, especially say desktop display, where initially it was just to check the box. Am I advertising in mobile? Yes or no? And people wanted to start moving more dollars to mobile just because they knew that consumers were there. I think it's starting to pivot to just make that a whole lot more intelligent, which is what Lauren was just referencing, which is, it's not just about serving into mobile. It's about, using some of the intelligence that behind that device ID to really tailor the experience and make it relevant.
All right. Our customers tend to be older, so how should we reconcile these findings, being sure to address both social and mobile while still keeping our customers in mind?
Well, I have one little comment there, being older, is that I think what's one thing that's happened is that the experiences, again, are better. And so I think that becomes a factor. And certainly when you think about, some of the social dynamics, you see the connection between the parent and the child via the social piece. So I don't think that should be discounted at this point. And when it comes to mobile and the phone usage, the tablet also sees strong usage. So I think it's still a factor, and I think it'll continue to merge in terms of being close to one another in terms of the penetration.
Yeah, and I think the thoughts I would add on to that, Chris, is we talked a little bit about once you can build a true identity of who somebody is, there's all these additional consumer insights that you can unlock. Neustar has, for instance, 15,000 different online and offline attributes for every household in the United States. So some of those attributes include things like media preference. So I think the way I interpret that question anyway, which maybe not the true spirit of the question, but how I interpret that is digital isn't necessarily the right channel or shouldn't be the primary channel for some segment or universe of shoppers, and that's the case. Some people, that's not the preferred channel. So having the ability to unlock consumer insights and understand what media preferences are before you're about to target somebody is important, because there may be a segment that's of the population that's older that, again, you don't start perhaps in digital. You may start with email or you may start with direct mail, and that's okay, right? It's all, how do you leverage all these insights to ultimately map out what the right media mix is based on your different segments of customers.
And I also think while they might not be purchasing to the same degree, they can still be researching to an important degree that you need to have in consideration, because they're certainly going to be making a stop there along their journey.
Right. All right. Well, I think we have run out of time. We have a couple more questions that we will send emails out for, but that concludes our presentation today. Again, thank you to our speakers, and thank you for everybody in attendance. If we weren't able to address your questions, like I said, we'll follow up via email, and you will receive an on-demand version of this webinar in the next couple days. With that, thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon.